Hey, folks, good evening, and thanks for joining me on Phantoms and Monsters Radio. I welcome all new listeners and members to the channel, as well as first timers in the chat. So, tonight, Fae, Duende, and similar little beings are supernatural, often nature based creatures found in folklore and mythology across the globe. Now, they can be seen as nature spirits, helpers, or even tricksters, with variations in their descriptions and powers depending on the specific tradition. Now, the term fae broadly refers to a collective of supernatural beings, including fairies, elves, gnomes, sprites, and other natural or nature spirits. The fairy folk are believed to be ancient beings that inhabited the earth before the Celts or Anglo-Saxons. Now, duende in particular are small human like beings often associated with mischievous acts or even malevolent, but can be also benevolent. Their origins are part of the Hispanic culture and folklore. In essence, little beings are a diverse and fascinating group of creatures that have captivated human imagination for centuries, reflecting our deep connection to nature and the supernatural. So, before I go any further, I want to mention that this channel is made possible by clicking on the subscribe and like buttons and by sharing our programming. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below in the chat box. Other donation links are also shown in the description, and thanks for your consideration. Your comments are always welcome. Tell me which accounts you find interesting in the presentation or suggestions for upcoming shows. I want to again thank our chat moderators, Bernadette, Marla, Thomas, and Mike, as well. So I want to thank Kevin and Mary at ESP. Now, if you're in the chat and you have a question, please use all caps, and I'll try to get to each and one of them after the presentation. So, this first witness states, "Hi, this happened about 15 years ago when I was about 18. I was taking a long hot bath than anything else. Typical winter day in Wausau, Wisconsin. The bathroom was set up so that the toilet was positioned about 5 feet directly across from my head while I was lying back in the tub. There was a potted plant on top of the toilet tank. Now, while I lay there relaxing, I suddenly noticed that there was a tiny bright golden white light fluttering in the plant. It looked like it was going from leaf to leaf, stopping to rest sometimes. I was confused as to what it could be and just lay there watching it for a minute. I decided to get up and see what kind of insect could be doing this in the winter. I stood up from the tub quietly and crept over to the plant. And when I was about a foot away, the light just went out, like instantaneously disappeared. I searched all over the plant. It wasn't that large, and around the toilet, didn't find anything. I have no idea what it was. The light was a beautiful, clear, gold white color that I hadn't seen anywhere else. It wasn't the glow stick like green yellow that fireflies or glowworms have. Also, it didn't flicker or fly like a firefly, assuming, of course, that a full grown one could even be found in the winter. I guess it could have been a lot of things, but it's always seemed fairy like to me. Now, a couple is hiking and camping in Gifford Pinchot National Forest when a gossamer like entity appears to the woman. Later, her companion encountered the same entity at home. So the witness states, before my husband and I were married, we went overnight hiking on one of our first dates. It was about a 5 mile hike to our destination, the Bolt Camp Shelter. It's just a little wooden shelter in the middle of nowhere in Pinchot National Forest. The hike was beautiful. The sun was going down, and there were many ancient Douglas fir trees with hollow bases. The sun was setting through them, and they looked like little fairy abodes with warm hearth fires burning within. There were little wooden footbridges here and there. We could imagine little trolls living under them. As night fell, we started seeing all these bioluminescent mushrooms on fallen logs, glowing an impossible shade of green. It was magical. We arrived at the shelter, built a fire, ate dinner, drank a bit, and went to sleep under the shelter, which was half collapsed because a tree had fallen on it at some point. I woke up in the middle of the night, cold because the fire was out. Of course, it was pitch black. My husband was sleeping toward the outside of the shelter, me on the inside, facing near the back. That's when I saw it, a thing, whatever it was, floating around inside the shelter. I don't know how to describe it other than a pinkish gossamer spider web looking thing flying through the air, turning and twisting over and over on itself. It was quite lovely. I wasn't afraid of it, but so fascinated. I wanted to wake him up and ask if he could see it, but I was afraid it would either disappear or he wouldn't be able to see it and think I was crazy. I mean, I barely knew the guy, so I watched it for a bit, fell back asleep, and said nothing. That was until a couple months later when we'd gotten more familiar and were reminiscing about our trip. I told him about it, and his mouth dropped open in shock. So we'd pack up and left the next day, and I dropped him off at his house. That night, he was out on his porch having a beer when he saw the same thing, twisting, floating through the air, seemingly almost a living thing. It dissipated near some shrubs. He was staring, wondering what the heck he just saw, when a pair of glowing red eyes appeared. He freaked a bit and booked inside, never spoke of it to anyone until I told him about my own experience at the camp. Now, Duende hold a significant place in the cultural fabric of Latin America. They represent a connection to the supernatural and continue to captivate and intrigue people across different cultures. Duende are mythical creatures that have been part of Latin American and Spanish folklore for centuries. They're often portrayed as elf like beings and mischievous personalities. Excuse me. Sorry. In different regions, Duende take on various forms and have unique characteristics. Now, one popular representation of Duende can be found in South American country of Ecuador, where they are known as El Duende. In Ecuadorian folklore, El Duende is often portrayed as a small gnome like creature. El Duende is believed to inhabit natural landscapes such as forests, mountains, and rivers. They are said to dwell in hidden places using their magical powers to guard the environment and its inhabitants. These mythical creatures are often described as small beings with pointy ears and hats who are known for the playful and sometimes prankster nature. So I received a telephone call from Juan de Diaz Silva, an Ecuadorian man who lives in the United States. He's quite familiar with the folklore of his native Ecuador, especially when it comes to El Duende. Now, he told me about an experience that his grandmother and great aunt had during the 1910s. The sisters named Amada, one's grandmother, aged 8 years old, and Zuola, uh, one's great aunt, aged 7 years old, lived in a small town of Aluce, located in the Chimborazo province of Ecuador among the foothills of the Andes Mountains. One prefaced the story by explaining that the women in their family were very beautiful and that they possessed another unique characteristics, namely that they were very hairy. The family had a small store in the town, and the sisters were responsible for gathering the rubbish from the business and taking it to a field outside of town so it could be burned. This was usually a daily chore. So one day the sisters were dragging the rubbish toward the field, and as they were walking, Zuela told Ameda that a small boy was standing by the tree and that he was smoking a cigar. Also, the boy had very large shoes. This boy intently watched the girls as they passed him by. He didn't take his eyes off of them. The boy was an El Duende, or what they referred to as a Tintin. It was said that Tintin usually appeared at night and threw pebbles at girls to get their attention to make them fall in love. He would follow the girls that interested him and wouldn't leave them alone. He would chase beautiful and virgin women with long black hair and lots of body hair. He made them fall in love to take them away or to father abnormal children, often half animals, half men. Now, the sisters tried to ignore Tintin, but he began to follow them. According to Amada, he got close to them and began to tickle the sisters, thus falling under his possessive spell. Now, sometime later, the sisters were found lying in the field by a local man who happened to notice the unresponsive girls. They were both foaming at the mouth. The man knew the girls and the family from town, so he picked them up and took them to his home, or took them to their home, where they soon recovered. It became apparent that Tintin did not harm them or violate the sisters. Now, one told me that it was a tale that both his grandmother and great aunt would relate to the children. Though Amato was somewhat hesitant to do it at times. I have received many Duende accounts over the years, but I was intrigued and pleased to have his personal story told to me. Now, this next witness tells me, hello, Lon. One day in 1988, I was on my way to an appointment in London's southeast area. I was traveling through Oxford Circus to get to the line that would take me to my station. In the Oxford Circus Underground, there were at least 3 levels, which are hubs with various lines that run through them, and I was on the second level heading to my eastbound train. I passed through the main hub of that level, which had escalators going up to the street level and a series of other tunnels branching off of it. As I approached the main chamber, I was overcome by wonder and curiosity because there was a sound coming from there that I couldn't really comprehend. It was musical, and yet at the same time, it wasn't. The sound was very enchanting, and I was becoming more and more curious by the second to see what was making it. Now, entering the main chamber en route to the other tunnel, I looked over to the source, and this is what I saw in the few seconds it took to cross that chamber. There were 2 very long escalators going up and down to the street level, and the center between the two stood a little man. I noted that he was cherubic in stature with stocky arms and legs and a face with rosy cheeks. And even at my location a few feet away, I could see his eyes were extremely blue, otherworldly in color and twinkling. His lips were red, he had a white mustache and beard, and his hair was blonde silver in color. These details were striking about the others that were in evidence. Now, in his hands, he held a delicate silver flute from which the sound of music, if you could call it that, was emanating. It was enchanting in the sense that one's mind would try to resolve it to a melody or a harmony, and then it would dance away and become something else. His dress was very much what you would imagine were you to see a leprechaun in real life. Drab in color with beige, earth green, and khaki brown tones, with boots that looked like they were made of felt and the like, and even a small felt khaki green hat on his head with a feather in it. Okay, so he would have been dressed in a costume. And that would have been the end of my curiosity were it not for what happened around him. Crowds of people came up and down those escalators on both sides were reaching into their pockets and wallets and dropping money into his oversized flute case. But but it was overflowing with coins. That was what caught my attention. And the fact that the people who were tossing in the money weren't even looking at him. It was like they were in a trance. He was looking at me the whole time, watching me to see what was going on. And I must have registered some astonishing awareness on my face because he smiled in the middle of his playing and gave me a wink and a nod. He continued to play on, that eerie music filling the hall and the ears and mind. And the people continued like sleepers, not paying attention, just digging in their pockets and dropping money into his bag. I continued to my connecting tunnel, and not a few feet down that tunnel, I encountered a young man playing an electric guitar with an amplifier who was being completely drowned out by the eerie sounds coming from the adjoining chamber. I investigated his guitar case as I went by and saw that he had only a few coins in it. I looked at his face and he gave me the look that bespoke amazement and irritation that his music was being drowned out by the otherworldly one coming from the main hall. Feeling badly for him, I dropped the pound coin into his case and continued my way, slightly befuddled what I had just seen and experienced. I later shared this with some friends that had seen what I thought was a real leprechaun and told them the story. They laughed at me and thought I'd lost my marbles. Then, about a week or so later, one of my friends came up to me at work very excited. She said that she had just seen my leprechaun in the same place in the same situation I had described. Everything was the same down to the people in the trance dropping money into his bag. She said when she was had seen him, her mouth dropped open in amazement as she realized I had been telling it exactly as it was, and he too had looked over to her during that moment of astonishment and gave her a wink and a nod. We never saw or heard of him again after that, so perhaps he got what he needed. Excuse me, folks. Now, this next account, the witness states on July 2nd, 2007, I was at my summer cottage near Lake Erie in western New York State. I was walking my dog out at about 8 o'clock p.m. The sun was just beginning to go down behind the trees, casting a beautiful fractured light on the front of the house. In the distance, I could hear my neighbor's ATV driving around the undeveloped wetlands adjacent to my property. Suddenly, my dog began acting erratically, pulling on the leash to go back inside and turning his head toward the sky, looking this way and that. I spoke to him, asking what was wrong, and looked around to see what was disturbing him other than the noise in the woods. That is when I saw a peculiar wing creature flying from out of the woods across the front of the house. Now, the creature's wings were about 3 inches across. The wings were transparent and rounded on the ends. If you formed a C with your thumb and forefinger and then touched your thumbnails together, you would have a rough estimation of the shape of the rear wings of the creature. The wings were not fluttering like a butterfly or vibrating like a dragonfly's, which are two common insects in my yard. The creature was gliding with perhaps a slight vibration. I only saw the creature for a length of time it took to fly to the end of the house. Now, once it got beyond the house into the open area of the front yard, it disappeared. My eyes were on it the whole time. The body was strangely human like in shape with legs dangling from below. By the shape of the wings, I assumed it was a four winged creature. I thought after the being disappeared was that must be what people see when they say they saw a fairy. I felt elated seeing this creature. It was nothing I'd ever seen before. So this next witness states On January 28th, 1967, and this is a story he told me, a few young friends aged between 10 and 11 years were playing near Dell at Studham, Bedfordshire. The events that followed turned that day into anything but ordinary. There was a footpath leading to the Dell, which is like a small overgrown valley surrounded by bushes and trees beside Common. It had been raining earlier, but now the sky was clear. As the boys talked back and forth, suddenly a flash of lightning struck nearby. One of the boys, Alex Butler, who was a little bit ahead of the others, stopped in surprise when he reached the edge of the bank above the dell. Standing near some bushes at the foot of the opposite bank, about 20 yards away, was a little blue man. Now, for a moment or two, Alex stared at this curious stranger in amazement before shouting to his friends to come and look. They too stopped in bewilderment. The little blue man was about 3 foot tall with a tall hat or helmet, which added to his height, and he glowed blue all over. He had two round eyes, a strange flat triangle instead of a nose, and his short arms were held at his side and didn't appear to move. His blue beard was forked, two parts running down each side of his chest. The strange little man wore a one-piece suit, again of glowing blue with a black belt. In front of the buckle was a black box, which was about 6 inches square. As the boys got near to where he was standing, a strange whirling cloud of yellow blue mist moved towards them, and in an instant, the strange little man vanished. As their eyes searched the dell, they spotted him again. This time, they also heard strange babbling voices. Could there have been more strange little men hidden in the undergrowth? Twice more, as the boys tried to approach him, the little blue man disappeared into a puff of yellow blue mist. Then the boys heard the school bell and rushed off in great excitement to tell their teacher, Mrs. Newcomb, everything they had seen and heard. After listening to the story, their teacher made them write it all down and make sure there was no copying. On March 3rd, 1967, the Dunstable Gazette ran a short article on the Little Blue Men, and then led to a reporter from the Flying Saucer Review interviewing the boys and gathering all the details together. It was a mystery that needed investigating. Who or what was the Little Blue Man? Some people felt the boys had imagined it all. However, the boys' teacher felt sure they had been telling the truth and that the unusual incident had really happened. And UFO investigators suggested that the black box could have been a receiver and the forked beard some kind of breathing apparatus. However, no UFO sightings reported in the area at the time. So it seems we can only guess that what was in the Dell that day, and that it remains a mystery, unless, of course, the little blue man returns once more. Now, an outdoorsman and mushroom hunters observed a bipedal short humanoid walking through the woods. He eventually realized that this was not a woodland animal. So he tells me, I'll be the first to admit I thought these type of sightings were a joke and not real, and I've never been able to take them seriously. I am an outdoorsman, and I've been so for 35 years. I grew up in the woods. I memorized trees from mushroom hunting for a living. I know every brook, stream, bush, berry grove, log, you name it. Because of this, I want to keep my location private. I'm on a forest road and not a soul in sight. I gather some of the mushrooms and look up the road to see a rock had fallen from the loose, steep side of the mountain to the middle of the road. I mentally noted that must move it and not drive over it. I gather my mushrooms and go back to the car. I looked up and I saw what appeared to be a 2 or 2.5 foot tall little brown thing walking from the side of the road over to the rock. Now, my first logical thought was it was a squirrel, but I see it's walking on two legs, appears to be wearing brown cloth or fur clothes, and it's shaped like a human but very thin. It's not scurrying either, it's ambling on two legs like a human would, just casually walking like in some normal, regular thing, like the monotonous work it does for a living. I don't believe my lying eyes. It must be something else. I get back in my car and head up the road to see that the rock was being pushed to the side of the road from whence it came. It had fallen off the hill, rolled to my left, and it was sitting back on the other side of the road to my right. There were drag marks like somebody slid it back. I look, I smell, I sense, I listen. Nothing. I don't know where gnomes live, but the old partially logged section where I was looked, I had looked perfect from the clan of these things. Lots of things to hide, secluded near water, plenty of routes of escape. It would be easy to dig little holes in the mountain to be fortified against invaders. The side road into it was flooded and appeared to do so regularly, so these little guys even had their own moat. I'm positive I'm overthinking this. It was a long drive back up the mountain, then down the mountain to the other way, and sometimes home. And I can't pick this apart into anything else but being that there's little tiny little forest men. I'm 1,000% positive that what I saw. I was near a military special interest zone, allegedly blocked off due to some native butterflies, but I'm starting to wonder if this research area is really about butterflies after all. They send you to prison, ban you from parks, and give you a $5,000 fine if you take a single berry from inside that boundary. So I wonder what it was he found. Now, in this next account, a Costa Rican man tells of his experience with a duende. He later describes his current encounters with Fae in his Northern California home. So he tells me, I'm Costa Rican, and this little people folklore is heavily instilled in children, so they don't go running off to become duende with forest folk. Last time I visited the country, I was sleeping on the floor and was awoken calmly in the middle of the night. At the end of the bed, there was a shadow figure, 2 feet tall, stocky, and robust, just watching me sleep. I didn't feel disturbed or even offended. I felt well guarded and watched over, so I went back to sleep without a second thought. I even invited the one day to stay as long as they'd like. Now, when I later awoke, my dad told me, who was sleeping in the living room, that he had woken up in the middle of the night and the back patio door in his field of vision from the couch had opened slowly in the middle of the night and he heard something coming in. Emotionally, he responded the same way and just went back to sleep as if the creature had a connection, relationship, responsibility to be there. At a heart based level, neither one of us questioned why or how it was there. Now, later in the trip, we walked around the rainforest and I swore a fae had called me telepathically. I turned to look and my eyes were drawn to a tree. It had a hole in its stump and very obviously looked like a den. There were grass strands right in the front of it fluttering, yet no wind. I knew it was a fae, and I came right up to the door, said hello and thank you, then went on my way. Now that was 10 years ago. Now fast forward to year 2020. I live in Northern California in Chico. My apartment is infested with fae. It was previously rented by an older woman who had passed away. They fed the alley cats and would always have them over. It held that aura once I moved in. I tried cleansing it, but lo and behold, those spirits were strong and in love with the home, so we lived mutually. In my shower, I constantly see fluttering lights dancing around with me. I eventually began offering the Fae anything that could appease them simply because they could make a space very buzzing and electric, sometimes an overwhelming feeling. Milk, honey, rum, chocolate, bread, mints, sweets, flowers, stones, and kind words and affirmations were my offerings. I set up a little home for them and would light candles every night to symbolize the warmth and welcome that I was extending. They were certainly mischievous and can be emotionally flustering. What people say is their angry and vengeful side. It seems gnomes and fae work together. They live in the same medium realm and communicate with humans in the same way. Gnomes mind their own business for the most part, but they will garner your attention. Now, in this next account, Williamton, North Carolina experiencer wrote about seeing a different fae in her sister's house and in the cemetery nearby. She wonders if these beings are attracted to her. So she tells me, Lon, I just read one of the stories you blogged about fae. I wanted to give you a brief report of my encounters. I saw a brownie. It was about 2 inches tall, long, and tall, humanoid, but walked on all fours. with brown skin, brown clothes, and brown hair. I was walking on the floor and under my sister's bed. I jumped and screamed. I asked if they had weird bugs in the area or any pets. She said no. Of course, it was gone a second later. The later the later saw one that had I later saw one that had autumn colored feathery wings under a different bed in the same house. It was also crawling on all fours and only saw the wings. It was also gone a moment later, and there was nothing under the bed with those colors. In the woods surrounding the house, often heard a soft sound of tiny bells and quiet giggles from the trees. Now, in a nearby cemetery, while visiting my grandpa's grave, a small, pale, flying humanoid zoomed past my head and into the woods. I wanted to ask you if you think that these fae are attracted to certain people. I find it fascinating that you theorize that the Chicago winged humanoids may show themselves to certain people. I wonder if it's the same applies to fae. All my experiences took place in Wilmington, North Carolina, near the ocean front. So, Santa Fe, New Mexico father and son are taking a late night walk in their neighborhood when they observe a 3 foot tall, scrawny humanoid. Then two more humanoids materialize. So, the witness states, my father and I used to take late night walks due to his insomnia after shift work. Our neighborhood is considered very safe and ultimately was an urban neighborhood, Santa Fe, New Mexico. One of the roads toward the back of the neighborhood was lined with thick forest for about a mile and about a quarter deep, which made a circle back itself. All these walks are very dear memories of mine, except one, and it ended being the last one. Along the road with the tree line, there was a single street light to illuminate a small plot of land that someone owned, but was very overgrown and ill kept. It was very common for us to walk this road to enjoy the sounds of the forest, the lack of illumination, and the ease of circling back. So one ordinary night, as we were walking and making conversation, my father abruptly stopped, pulled me close, put a hand over my mouth, crouched with me, and pointed towards a single illuminated plot roughly 100 yards away. At first, I didn't see anything and thought he was pulling my leg, but just as I began to protest his grasp, I saw a very small humanoid figure, roughly 3 foot in height, scrawny with long limbs, materializing out of the plot's brush line and cautiously take its surroundings before signaling the brush. After a few seconds, two more small humanoid figures materialized as well. After a moment of what looked like a discussion, all three dashed from the forest tree line. Once this happened, my father picked me up, threw me over his shoulder, and made a break for our home, which was roughly a half mile back. Mind you, now my father was 6'5", 220 pounds, and roughly 120 pounds. I was only about 120 pounds at the time. And he never showed signs of slowing due to his fear and adrenaline. Now, after that night, we never took late night walks. He installed 4 bright motion detector lights around our acre plot and brought home a dog. A few times I've tried bringing it up, he doesn't want to discuss it and has made it clear that he never wanted to. Those figures still give me chills, and the image of the three huddled together is very vivid 15 years later. Now, this next account, after a series of strange incidents, it culminates in a knock at the door. The Irish woman sees a girl at the door and then realizes she has black eyes. Was this a fae? I'm telling this story for the first time. The only other people who know about this are my immediate family members. I know it sounds completely fabricated and I have no way to prove any of it, but it happened. But I'll do my best. I'm originally from Ireland. I moved to the States roughly 20 years ago. The story takes place in County Clare, Ireland, when I was about 15 years old. One afternoon, I was walking through the woods near my home. I was alone. I was a loner in my youth, and I would often stroll the woods until I found a tree to sit beneath and write. Writing has always been my hobby. My point is that I was very familiar with these woods and I felt safe there. Now, on this day, I was walking a path to a specific tree that was my favorite to sit beneath. The sounds of the woods were all around me. There was a gentle breeze, and while I couldn't see the birds, I could hear them. It was comforting. And then it all stopped. Everything became unnaturally still. The air was still. The birds stopped twittering, and I no longer heard a single thing. I had never experienced it before. It was as if as if I had suddenly become deaf. There was just nothing, no sound, no movement, no breeze. And at this point, I started to become anxious. I wasn't afraid yet, but I started home anyway. The feeling in the woods was not what it used to. I was used to. I was no longer comforted, so I decided to go home. It was then that I saw movement from the corner of my eye. Nothing I could pinpoint, but a dark shape that was just there. And then it wasn't. Everything else was still that eerie calm. I started to walk faster, and then the black shape appeared again, this time on the other side. Now I was afraid. I began to run. I still heard nothing, but I was sure something was chasing me. When I reached my home, I ran inside and slammed the door, fully expecting my mom to yell at me for slamming. But she wasn't there. In fact, nobody was home. That was a bit odd, but not unheard of. Finally, gaining some sanity, I decided I needed tea. Now. So I began to boil the water for tea, and then there was a knock at the door. I jumped. My heart rose to my throat. Nobody knocked in these parts. It was a small village where everyone knew everyone else. Everyone was family. There was no knocking. There was a friendly oi there, and then people came in, so the knock was strange. I crept over to the glass in the door and peeked out. I noticed two things right away that terrified and confused me. The first was a child, a girl maybe 10 or 12, looking at me, looking not at me, but at her feet. The second thing scared me to my toes. It was getting dark. How was this possible? I had left to go on my walk at midday. The sun had been fully out and had been gone no longer than 40 minutes. How then was it dark? I looked at the clock. It was almost 7. How? How had I misplaced 5 hours? The knock came again and I jumped again. I didn't open the door. I called out, "Oi there, can I help you?" The girl didn't look up. She said, "I need to come in. Please let me in." She had no accent. She wasn't Irish. There was no lilt in her voice. She sounded American. I called out again. "I can't let you in, but I'll ring someone if you need help." The child still didn't look up. She said, "No, that won't work. I need to come in." And at this point, I had enough of this strange, scary child. She freaked me out. I wanted my mom. I wanted my dad. I wanted to know where 5 hours of my life had gone, and I was so frightened at this point that not even the tea was going to help. So I did what any teenage girl would do when faced with a situation like this. I screamed and ran to my bed. I covered myself with the blanket and waited for my mom to come home. Now, these were pre cellular phones, and I was not going to risk going to the kitchen to phone someone. Plus, I had no idea who I would call. The girl was still knocking on the door, but she never moved to a window or the back door. She stayed at the front door. So after a while, I got my nerve up to go check again. It had been silent for a while. I went to the door and looked out the window. The girl was still there, but she was no longer at the door. She was sitting on the fence. She was no longer looking down. She was looking right at me. And in the fading light, it looked like her eyes were pitch black. I screamed again and ran back to the safety of my blanket. Eventually, my mom came home. I told her what happened. She decided that it was my overactive imagination, but she did call down to the shops and the pubs to find out if anyone in town had an American girl visiting or anyone knew who the girl was. Nobody did. My grandmother told me I had survived an encounter with a fae or fairies and that I was lucky. She was the only one who ever believed me. I never saw the girl again. I never missed time again. I never felt absolute stillness in the woods again when I got up the courage to go back. After I moved to the States and years later, I heard of the black eyed children. My story seemed to coincide with that, but that's ridiculous, right? I still have no explanation. Demon, fairy. Now, the fake is said to be evil and will kidnap children in the woods or near a fairy hill. Was it a ghost? Black eyed child? I don't know. But it happened, and I swear to that. So, folks, that was the last account. Got any questions? Put them up there, and we'll see what we can answer for you. All caps, please, if you can. I don't know how good I am answering questions about Fae and little people, but I'll do the best I can. No questions? Libby asked, I wonder why the front door. I have no idea. I really don't. Uh, that is a good question. I really don't know. Marla Snyder, do you get more benevolent or malicious Fae accounts? Probably benevolent. Very rarely I get anything that's malicious or malevolent. Um, as far as yeah, as for what I believe. I mean, occasionally you'll get you'll get something that has a little twist to it, but normally they're very benevolent beings, from what I can tell. Jose Sanchez, are these little blue guys related in any way to the blue aliens of communion? From the description, it doesn't seem to describe those. I mean, those things were a little more stout than that. I don't know if I talked to Whitley Strieber at some point. I will ask him. I haven't talked to him in a while. We did a case together many years ago, but if I do think about it, I will ask him. Robo 1776 super chat. Thanks again. Are the little people a distinct race? There are stories of little people who have battles with Native Americans, vicious battles. Yeah, in some lore, there some of the tribe lore they talk about. I know the Shawnee have little people encounters, which is interesting because the Shawnee were the tribes that lived in West Virginia in and around the area of Point Pleasant and that part. And actually they used to live up in Pennsylvania as well. Alexis Chasen, have you ever seen a little being before, Lon? No, I haven't. Not that I can tell. I've heard a lot of stories, and I've talked to people personally who said they have seen them, but myself, no, I haven't. CS, did the black eyed face start in the British Isles? I don't know. That's the first time I've ever heard a black eyed kid associated with possible being a fae or a gnome or some other supernatural being, though I'm quite sure black eyed kids are supernatural to a point, but what are they really? We really don't know. Could they be fae? Maybe. Leckham the spicy lizard. In comparison to other phenomena, do you find little people to be more dangerous and supernatural compared to Bigfoot, Dogman, etc.? Um, I don't know. Maybe. Maybe there's more mystery behind them. We've been, look, the Dogman. That's something I don't want to come up against. Now, I've had a Bigfoot encounter. I didn't really seem like it was a malicious being to me. But then again, what really are Fae and little people? I mean. I don't know if I can really give you an objective answer to that, but it's an interesting question. Very, really. Any other questions, folks? I did want to say if you have any other phenomena that you'd like for me to talk about, please contact me at lonstricklerfamsandmonsters.com or in the comments section. Um, I'll see what I can do. That it? Okay. Well, I want to thank each and all of you for watching and chatting. And if you donated, it's truly appreciated. CS, thank you for your donation. And if your support is what makes all this possible, so please like, subscribe, and share. And if you have a sighting or encounter report that you'd like to be considered for the personal report show or post at Fams and Monsters, or you just want to ask me a question, feel free to contact me at lonstricklerphantomsandmonsters.com. So until we meet again, stay healthy and safe. Have a great weekend. Good night.